Now, I have to admit I've never really taken an interest in the spicy Fiat 500. I've always seen it as too small and too tall, but this 595 Competizione has all the ingredients to make it something quite special. Now, I'm no expert on this car, but anything with a proper mechanical limited slip diff, Koni FSD dampers, and some proper 305mm Brembos should be a hoot to drive on a B-road. Anyway, enough chit chat, let's find out, shall we? My name's Tom, and you're watching Paragon Cars. Let's go. Now, as I said, I'm no expert on this car, but as a VAG fanboy, I'll try my best to do an unbiased review. The engine is a 1.4 litre T-Jet. In this car, it produces 180 brake horsepower and a respectable 250 Nm. Doesn't really sound like much, but remember it's lighter than other hot hatches. In fact, its 170 brake horsepower per tonne is higher than the new Fiesta ST200, so it should be pretty nippy. Let's see how this pocket rocket does on the 30-70 sprint. Well, it certainly felt quick, although that could be because it's literally the size of a shoebox. But anyway, the fastest time I managed was 5.81 seconds. That's only half a second slower than the Mark III Focus RS, and I actually think I could have gone quicker with some faster, better time shifts. I tried shifting after 6,000 RPM, but the engine really dies after about 5.5, and actually gave me slower times. On the inside, there's this weird juxtaposition of materials. In some places you'll find the expected cheap scratchy plastics, but in others there's high quality carbon fibre and some super soft Alcantara. There's even some metal pedals, which is a very nice touch. Coming to the dash, it houses a pretty neat looking digital display that shows you all your trip info, as well as your revs and your speed. Put it into sports and the dial changes, showing your ever important G meter. The infotainment in this particular car has been swapped for a slightly more functional Pioneer system. I don't think it looks quite as nice, but with built-in Spotify, it's certainly something worth having. There's then the TTC button, otherwise known as Torque Transfer Control. This effectively allows you to control the ESP. Turn it on, and it'll brake the inside wheel to give you more cornering traction out of tight bends. Turn it off, and you just rely on your right foot and the diff. We'll see what that's like later, but first, let's have a look at the back. It's, yeah. At least there's a sunroof to let some more light in. The boot tells a similar story. At only 185 litres of capacity, it's certainly not a car for your holiday luggage. Having said that though, fold the seats down, remove the laughable parcel shelf, and you have a pretty decent amount of space for a weekly shop. Okay, before we get on the road, let's have a quick listen to what a hot hatch should sound like. VAG, please take note. Okay, let's get cracking. So, coming from your typical VAG fanboy, what does a 4-year-old Abarth 595 feel like? Well, we're going to start off around town, move on to the motorway, and then do some B-road driving. That's where I think this Abarth will really shine. Initial impressions, the steering is really light actually. It's actually lighter than that BMW X6 we reviewed a while ago. And the gear shift, although this is only a 5-speed manual, it has a really nice positive shift feel to it. And because the knob itself is actually made out of metal, it's really nice to use. Certainly feels a lot more premium than the rest of the cabin. Clutches are another thing the VAG group actually doesn't get right most of the time. For some reason they like to have a really profound bite point. I actually prefer it to be kind of one smooth continuous action, and this Abarth 595 actually does that really well. It's very easy to know where the bite point is, and you're never sort of chugging in first gear. Another thing that's quite good is actually the pedal placement. It's set up so the brake is directly in front of your chest instead of being offset to the right, which should mean left foot braking is quite easy in this car. Find out later, I guess. Another thing you notice pretty much straight away is just that really nice low down grumble from the engine. Adds a huge amount of character to the car. Of course, parking this is made pretty easy. You do actually have rear facing parking sensors, but to be honest, I don't think you even need those. Steering lock is actually not that good, but because the car is just so damn small, you can get into literally any space so easily. Massive plus for this car, I think. Driving around town, this car is absolutely amazing. It's fun below 30 miles an hour pretty much everywhere. Doesn't seem to have auto rev matching though. Coming out of junctions, because it's easy to find the bite point with the clutch. It's a very easy car to drive. I've reset the trip computer to see what kind of MPG we're going to get, but first we're going to see what the handling's like. I'm going to go for sports mode, and I'm going to go for TTC on first. Steering's heavier, throttle response is increased. Dampers feel a bit more stiff. Don't know if that's actually a thing. Correct me if it's not. Feels pretty fast though, I have to say. And that TTC definitely works. You can feel it just grabbing the inside wheel a little bit. I would like an extra speed on the gearbox though. For now, we're just going to go back into comfort mode, and the steering is quite vague in comfort mode, but we are just going to see what the MPG is like on the motorway. Okay, so what about refinement then? Well, road noise and wind noise are actually pretty good. The road noise is especially good. We're riding on 17-inch wheels, I believe, with Michelin Pilot Sport 4s, and yeah, there's nothing really to complain about in that department. However, when it comes to the seat comfort, things are very different. For sporty driving, these seats are pretty good, but they sit way too high. I'm not even 6 foot tall, and my head is basically in the sunroof. And then in terms of adjustment, you can't adjust the height of the seat regardless of what you do. You have to actually buy brackets to lower the seat. That's quite a common thing that people do in these cars apparently, which is a shame. Plus, you can't adjust the pitch of the seat when you're on the move, because unless you've got absolutely minuscule hands, you won't be able to get your hand down the side of the seat. And the position of the steering wheel and the pedals is just so wrong. I'm way too far away from the steering wheel, yet my feet are basically on top of the pedals. But thankfully, because this is a small car, the visibility is absolutely fantastic. And it's made even better by the fact you've actually got coupe style doors. So there's pretty much no B pillar in this car. It's basically A pillar and C pillar. And the wing mirrors still have this curved bit of glass on the side like all German cars have. So seeing in your blind spot is really easy in this. Doing a long journey is, I don't know, it's not the worst thing in the world in this car, but it could be a lot better. If the steering wheel was just a little bit closer to me and tilted slightly further towards me, and the pedals were just slightly further away, it would be a much more comfortable car to sit in. Plus, if I could just lower the bloody seat, that would be a massive help. Then in terms of material quality, as I mentioned in the intro, it's this juxtaposition of materials that just don't make sense. Like, you've got this really nice soft touch Alcantara on top of the Speedo, yet surrounding it is this really cheap plastic, and that continues throughout the cabin. You've got actually quite nice metallic door handles, yet the actual door cards themselves are like Lego. They're really bad. And the steering wheel is the weirdest thing. I think these are optional, but you get these really high quality carbon fibre parts, and again you get that nice soft touch Alcantara, yet for some reason the leather, the bit you actually touch 90% of the time, is really low quality. If they had just put the leather on top and then put the Alcantara here, I'd have been much happier, I think. In terms of amenities, this car didn't come with a sat-nav when the owner spec'd it, so he swapped it out for this Pioneer unit that has Spotify and Bluetooth audio, Bluetooth calling. And it's pretty good, you know. It has all the functions you want it to have. And then, of course, you've got the climate control, and this is just a single-zone, air-conditioned climate control system. But that's all you really need in a car like this. You don't need dual-zone climate control. I don't think dual-zone climate control would actually do much anyway in a car this small. Then in terms of sound quality, sadly, these are the standard speakers, and they really don't have any audio quality to them. They don't get very loud, and even then, when you do turn them up to full volume, the bass has this kind of mushy punch to it. The mids are okay actually though, and the highs are actually okay as well. But comparing it to a car that's say £4,000 or £5,000 more than this, the Leon Cupra, it's not even comparable when it comes to sound. And the lack of centre armrest as well is something that kind of bugs me a bit on longer journeys. But for some reason, I still really like this car so far. There's just something about it that is so lovable. I think one of those things is actually just the way it drives on certain bits of road. On the motorway, the steering is still light, but it gains a little bit more precision when you're going faster. The brakes have a really nice positive feel to them, and they never make you go like, oh, this car's not going to stop. And the suspension is actually really good. It's not sophisticated, like it doesn't really round off the bumps that much, but it never really jars the cabin a lot. There's many more cars, much more expensive than this one, that have much poorer suspension, I think. And that combined with the surprising lack of road and wind noise actually makes this an okay car to travel in. But if there were 3 specs or 3 things that I would do to this car, first one, I would get a proper sound system and get a subwoofer put in the boot. The boot's small anyway, so taking up a little bit more room doesn't really matter, to be honest. But having a good sound system in a car like this would make it a lot better. And then one thing that you can actually option is the sunroof. And it's definitely something I would get because it just makes it look a little bit cooler. And to be honest, having a little bit more weight up top doesn't really matter in this kind of car. And another spec I would get are those seat brackets that allow you to lower the seat. I think they would make a massive difference to how this car drives, and it would just allow you to have a little bit more room between you and the pedals. So coming off the motorway then, we did manage just over 44 mpg, not quite the figure they claim you can get out of this car, but the stint we do on the motorway is quite short, so the figure will continue to rise, and you probably can get 51 mpg out of this. Do keep in mind though, the Audi RS5 we reviewed a couple of weeks ago got 42 mpg, so for a car this small and this light, I really do think you need an extra gear to extract the best possible performance out of this engine. Right, let's see how fun this car is on a bit of twisty road. Right, we are on a B road. I'm going to leave the TTC on going down here, and then I'm going to turn it off on the way back because I just want to see what the difference is. You can feel all front wheel drive cars always want to plough it straight, but the TTC does help keep this car sort of straight when you got the wheel turned. I've opened the panoramic roof just a little bit so we can get a bit more sound as well. It's quite easy to rev match in this car. Even though we're going slowly, it's quite a good fun car to use. Okay, let's turn it off and see what the difference is. Oh yeah, you can feel it definitely pulling a lot more. For some reason it gets rid of torque steer. Front end grip is also pretty good, although it does feel like you're about to fall over. Woohoo! Big splash. Brakes feel good. There's a lot of grip and you kind of know where you are, but because you are actually quite high up, it is slightly disconcerting at first. But the car is much more capable than you think it would be. And because it's so small, you have quite a few options when you're driving down a road like this. One thing I've noticed though is it's quite difficult to correct your line. You can't quite lift off oversteer in this car. You can straighten yourself a bit, but by no means is it a Fiesta ST. But for a B road, this car is pretty good. It's kind of like a slightly more fun VW Up GTI, I think. See what she's like around here then. Tight corner, TTC is on, I think. No, it's not. And you do notice it pulling from side to side slightly. But the torque steer is really not that bad. It's quite fun actually. One thing you do notice is just how fast this car accelerates. For 180 horsepower, it sure feels very quick. And it has surprisingly good stability around the faster corners. It's one of those cars you kind of just have to trust and go, I know the car can do it. I don't really know if I can do it, but the car certainly can. And you just have to get used to it. And the sound, oh, the sound is so good. I reckon a couple of pops and bangs would make it a little bit better. I know that's not everyone's taste, but I am quite a pop and bang fan. And I think it would make this car extra special. I don't really think it needs a stage 1 map, to be honest. What I do think it needs is something done to the engine that allows the revs to go above 6,000 and all the way to 7. When you hit about 5,500 RPM, the engine completely dies, which is why, if you noticed in the 30 to 70 time, I shifted at like 5,800 RPM. And that's what actually got me the fastest time. I tried revving it all the way out to the limiter, but it only goes to about 6,500, and then you actually do hit a limiter. But for a small car, it's a pretty fast thing. And obviously, because it is small, it feels like you're going warp speed when you're going about 30 miles an hour. But you know what? There's something about this Abarth that just makes me smile. For all its flaws, it makes it up with archaic amounts of charm. It's the dog that costs a lot in vet bills, then thanks you by crapping all over the kitchen floor. It's intrinsically irritating to live with, but then makes you laugh like no other dog can. And that, I think, is what justifies the price for me. Anyway, we're heading back to the dealership now, so I'm going to end the video here. As always, I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give us a like, and why not subscribe? Not only can you see other videos like this one, you'll also be able to see all the cars we have for sale. My name's Tom, and you've been watching Paragon Cars. Goodbye.